In the parking garage silence, Arthur sees a red laser dot flick across a pillar. A muffled proof follows gunfire with a silencer. He lunges, one hand clamping over Evelyn's red-lipped mouth, dragging her behind a concrete column. "Don't talk." He breathes, eyes scanning. A bullet shatters glass inches away. Across the garage, a shadow pauses, holding a parabolic mic. Evelyn's pulse hammers, her voice trapped. That single command, unspoken terror, urgent warning, saves her life. Arthur Miller knew the weight of silence. At 36, he'd learned it in desert outposts, where the wrong word could trigger an ambush, and now he taught it to his 7-year-old daughter Lily, in their cramped apartment above the bodega on 8th Street. Every morning at 5:45, he'd kiss her sleeping forehead before heading to Sterling Tower, where he pushed mops across marble floors that cost more than his yearly salary. His calloused hands, once steady on military engineering equipment, now gripped industrial cleaning supplies. But those same hands could still assemble a radio from spare parts or spot a surveillance device from 50 feet away. Lily was his universe. Her mother had vanished when she was 2, leaving nothing but a note about not being ready for motherhood. Arthur had rebuilt their life piece by piece, teaching Lily to tie her shoes with military precision, but also to paint sunflowers with wild abandon. Their refrigerator door served as her art gallery, covered in crayon drawings of the two of them holding hands beneath rainbow skies. She'd inherited his dark hair and serious eyes, but when she smiled, which was often, the whole room seemed to brighten. At Riverside Elementary, her teachers praised her kindness, though they worried about the patches on her backpack and the fact that she packed her own lunch every day. 20 floors above Arthur's supply closet, Evelyn Sterling commanded an empire. At 34, she ruled Sterling Industries with the ruthless efficiency her father William had instilled in her since childhood. Her platinum blonde hair was always pulled into a severe chignon, her red dresses tailored to perfection, her heels clicking authority across boardroom floors. Beauty was her armor, intelligence her weapon. She'd graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School, taken over 3 failing subsidiaries, and turned them into profit machines within 18 months. The business press called her the Ice Queen, and she wore the title like a crown. But crowns were heavy. Every morning, Evelyn stared at her reflection in her penthouse bathroom mirror, seeing her mother's eyes looking back, the mother who died when Evelyn was 12, leaving her alone with a father who showed love through stock options and performance reviews. William Sterling had built his daughter into a fortress, teaching her that vulnerability was weakness, that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. She'd had lovers, brief affairs, with men who wanted her money, or her body, or her influence, but never her heart. That organ, she'd learned, was better kept locked away. The contrast between their worlds couldn't have been starker. While Arthur heated leftover spaghetti on a hot plate for Lily's dinner, Evelyn attended $500 per plate charity galas. While he read Lily second-hand library books about brave princesses, Evelyn signed contracts worth millions without blinking. While he worried about making rent, she worried about hostile takeovers. They existed in the same building but different universes, connected only by the elevator cables that carried her past his floor every day. Neither knew the other existed beyond a peripheral awareness. She was the woman in red who never made eye contact. He was the maintenance worker who kept the building running while the powerful slept. The rhythm of their separate lives might have continued indefinitely. 2 parallel lines never meant to intersect. But Sterling Industries harbored secrets darker than its tinted windows, and one man had grown tired of waiting in the shadows. The quarterly board meeting had stretched past 11 that night, October rain drumming against the conference room windows. Evelyn gathered her files, dismissing her assistant with a wave. Her bodyguard Marcus waited by the elevator, a former Navy SEAL who'd protected her for 3 years without incident. They descended to the parking garage in silence, her mind already on tomorrow's merger proposal. The garage lights flickered. Maintenance had been reporting electrical issues for weeks, but she'd been too busy to approve the repair budget. Marcus walked ahead, scanning the shadows between the concrete pillars. Evelyn's Louboutins echoed in the vast space, her red dress a splash of color in the gray expanse. She was reaching for her phone when Marcus suddenly stiffened, his hand moving to his concealed weapon, a whisper of movement, barely visible. Then the soft pneumatic hiss of a silenced gunshot. and Marcus crumpled, clutching his shoulder. As he fell, something tumbled from his jacket, a USB drive that skittered across the concrete, stopping near a drainage grate. The label caught the fluorescent light. Internal audit. Q3. That's when Arthur appeared, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. He'd been checking the garage's ventilation system, a routine task that had saved Evelyn's life. After dragging Evelyn to safety, Arthur's trained eyes swept the garage with methodical precision. 2 more shadows shifted near the exit ramp. His fingers found Evelyn's wrist, tapping 3 times military code for stay down. She trembled against the concrete, her designer dress collecting oil stains. But she understood the primal message. Obey or die. Arthur slipped toward Marcus's prone form, checking for a pulse while palming the USB drive. The bodyguard was breathing but unconscious, blood spreading beneath his shoulder. Arthur produced a Ziploc bag from his maintenance cart, he always carried them for chemical spills, and sealed the USB inside. His mind raced through protocols from a different life, when securing intelligence meant the difference between coming home or coming home in a box. The shooters were professionals. They'd wait for their target to move, to panic. But Arthur had learned patience in places where sandstorms could last for days. He pulled out his phone. Not to call 911, the shooters would monitor emergency frequencies, but to activate a program he'd written years ago, one that cloned data while leaving the original untouched. The USB's contents flooded his screen. Spreadsheets, emails, video files. Names jumped out: board members, city officials, offshore accounts. At the center of it all, one name appeared repeatedly: Damian Cross, Sterling Industries Chief Operations Officer. Arthur had seen him once, a gaunt figure in a silver-gray suit who'd complained about water spots on his office window. The man's appearance had unsettled Arthur. Even then, pale skin stretched over sharp cheekbones, blonde hair slicked back with expensive pomade, gray eyes that seemed to catalog everyone's weaknesses. The shooters were moving now, coordinating through earpieces. Arthur recognized the pattern: military contractors, probably ex-special forces turned mercenary. They'd chosen their positions well, covering all exits. But they'd made one mistake. They'd assumed their targets would run. Arthur had different plans. He pulled Evelyn deeper into the mechanical room behind the parking level, where massive pipes and electrical panels created a maze of hiding spots. Her breathing was rapid. Panicked, he pressed his finger to her lips again, feeling her lipstick smear against his skin. She nodded, understanding that even a whisper could betray them through the concrete acoustics. The next 2 hours became a deadly game of cat and mouse. Arthur used his knowledge of the building's infrastructure to create distractions, triggering car alarms through the electrical system, reversing ventilation fans to create noise and confusion. When the shooters finally retreated, sirens approaching, he knew this was just the beginning. The USB in his pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Whatever Damian Cross was planning, it was worth killing for. Dawn was breaking when Arthur finally got Evelyn to a secure location, not the police station, which could be compromised, but an old safe house from his military days. She sat on a metal folding chair, her red dress torn, her perfect composure shattered. For the first time in years, Evelyn Sterling looked human, vulnerable, afraid. Damian Cross stood at his office window, watching the sun rise over the city. His diamond watch caught the light, an $18,000 reminder of how far he'd climbed from the foster homes of his youth. At 40, he'd orchestrated hostile takeovers that had destroyed entire companies, crushed competitors with the dispassion of someone stepping on insects. His reflection in the glass showed what he'd cultivated: a predator in a $10,000 suit, his pale features arranged in an expression of permanent calculation. The call came at 7:15. His mercenaries had failed, the USB was missing, and Marcus the bodyguard was in intensive care, unable to speak. Damian's fingers tightened on his phone until the knuckles went white. 20 years of planning. 2 decades of positioning himself as William Sterling's most trusted advisor. And now some maintenance worker. He'd already pulled Arthur Miller's personnel file, threatened everything. The USB contained enough evidence to destroy him, but more importantly, it revealed the final phase of his plan, forcing William Sterling to sign over control of the company through a combination of blackmail and fabricated evidence of insider trading. William was weak, sentimental since his wife's death. easy to manipulate through his devotion to his daughter. Damien had counted on that weakness, had nurtured it, feeding William's paranoia about competitors, while positioning himself as the only one who could protect Evelyn's inheritance. But now the maintenance man had the evidence. And worse, he had Evelyn. Damien activated his network dirty cops, private investigators, cyber specialists, who could track anyone through their digital footprint. Arthur Miller would surface eventually. He had a daughter, according to his file. 7 years old. Lily. Damien smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. Everyone had pressure points. The first attempt came at Lily's school. Arthur spotted the surveillance van immediately wrong plates for the neighborhood, antenna configuration that screamed intelligence gathering. He'd been picking Lily up personally since the garage incident, had taught her new games about seeing who could spot the most details on their walks home. She thought it was fun, not knowing her father was teaching her counter-surveillance techniques used by embassy personnel in hostile territories. The second attempt was more sophisticated. Mercenaries posing as utility workers approached their apartment building. Arthur watched from the bodega across the street, having installed cameras weeks ago. He'd moved Lily to 3 different locations in as many days, staying with old military contacts who asked no questions. But he couldn't run forever. Lily needed stability, school, the simple right to be a child without looking over her shoulder. Evelyn, meanwhile, discovered what it meant to be hunted. Stripped of her corporate armor, her penthouse fortress, she found herself dependent on a man she would have passed in the hallway without acknowledgement just days before. Arthur had placed her in a modest motel outside the city, paid cash, registered under a false name. She sat on the polyester bedspread, her platinum hair hidden under a baseball cap he'd bought at a gas station, and tried to process how completely her life had imploded. The evidence on the USB was damning but complex. Shell companies layered upon shell companies, bribes disguised as consulting fees, a web of corruption that implicated half the board of directors. But at its center was something worse. Evidence that Damien had been slowly poisoning William Sterling. Microdoses of a heavy metal that mimicked the symptoms of age-related cognitive decline. The quarterly vitamin shots William received from his private physician, Damien's college roommate, were actually destroying his mind from within. Arthur and Evelyn met in a diner off Interstate 95 to compare notes. She looked different in jeans and a plain sweater, younger, more fragile. They sat in a corner booth, speaking in low voices while truck drivers consumed coffee and eggs around them. "We have to go to the FBI," Arthur said, his hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee. Evelyn shook her head. "You don't understand. Damien has connections everywhere. Judges, prosecutors, federal agents. The moment we surface, we're dead. Then we release it to the press. With what proof that it's real? Damien will spin it as corporate sabotage, a deepfake, a competitor's attack. He owns 3 media conglomerates through shell companies." Arthur studied her face, seeing past the beauty to the intelligence beneath. "You're protecting your father." Her composure cracked. "He's all I have left. Yes, he's cold. Yes, he pushed me. But he's still my father. And according to these files, he's been slowly murdered for 2 years. Then we save him by exposing the truth. The truth will destroy him too. Some of these deals, before Damien's influence, my father wasn't innocent. Sterling Industries was built on stepped-on backs and broken promises. The investigation will ruin everything my family built." Arthur leaned back, processing. In his world, things were simpler. Protect Lily, eliminate threats, survive. But Evelyn lived in a universe of complicated loyalties, where love and betrayal were separated by interpretation rather than action. "My daughter drew a picture yesterday," he said suddenly. "It was our family." But she added a third person, a woman with yellow hair. She said our family looked lonely with just 2 people. Evelyn's eyes glistened. "I haven't been part of a real family since I was 12. Then maybe it's time to choose. Your father's empire, built on corruption, or a chance at something real, even if it means starting over." Their argument erupted then, sharp words flying across the Formica table. She accused him of not understanding the complexities of corporate survival, the thousands of employees who'd lose their jobs if Sterling Industries collapsed. He shot back that she was enabling the very system that had created monsters like Damien, that her silence made her complicit. They were both right, both wrong, both terrified of the precipice they stood upon. Finally, Evelyn broke. Really broke. 22 years of frozen emotions melted in an instant, and she sobbed into her hands while truckers politely looked away. Arthur moved to her side of the booth, awkwardly patting her shoulder. This warrior who could disarm a bomb but didn't know how to comfort a crying woman. She leaned into him. And for a moment, two strangers became something else. Two people, trying to survive. Something neither had asked for. The decision to run came when Damien's men found the motel. Arthur had been watching the parking lot through the scope of a rifle he'd acquired from an old contact when the black SUVs arrived. He grabbed Evelyn and the go-bag he'd prepared, escaping through the bathroom window while flashbang grenades shattered the front door. They ran through the woods behind the motel, Evelyn's designer flats shredding on the rough ground, until they reached the backup vehicle he'd hidden. Lily was waiting at the fourth safe house, guarded by Elias Flynn, Arthur's former unit commander who now worked for the FBI's Organized Crime Division. Elias had questions, lots of them, but he trusted Arthur enough to keep his niece safe while Arthur figured out the next move. The mountain cabin had been Arthur's grandfather's, a hunting retreat that hadn't seen visitors in 5 years. No electricity, no running water, just a wood stove and walls thick enough to withstand Vermont winters. Arthur knew a storm was coming, had felt it in his bones, the way his grandfather had taught him, reading the pressure changes and wind patterns. It would buy them time, make the roads impassable, give them a chance to think and plan. He loaded the truck with supplies from a cash-only general store 50 miles from anywhere. Canned goods, batteries, firewood, blankets, children's books for Lily, even a stuffed rabbit he'd spotted that looked like one she'd had as a baby. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat, having traded her destroyed flats for hiking boots that didn't quite fit. She'd never been camping, never split wood, or hauled water from a well. Her world had been climate-controlled, sanitized, managed by assistants, and maintained by people like Arthur. The storm hit just as they reached the cabin. Within hours, 2 feet of snow had fallen, with more coming. The temperature plummeted. Arthur taught Lily and Evelyn how to feed the wood stove, how to melt snow for water, how to heat cans of soup on the cast-iron surface. Lily adapted immediately, treating it like an adventure. She drew pictures by candlelight, built snow angels during brief breaks in the storm, and curled up between Arthur and Evelyn on the narrow couch while he read her stories. The second night, the temperature dropped to -10. The wood stove struggled to heat the drafty cabin. Arthur gave his jacket to Lily, his blanket to Evelyn, and sat up tending the fire in just a flannel shirt. Evelyn watched him through half-closed eyes. This man who'd gone from stranger to protector in 72 hours. His hands were gentle when he tucked Lily in, but she'd seen those same hands disable 2 mercenaries in the motel parking lot. The contradiction fascinated her. "You're freezing," she whispered when Lily was asleep. "I'm fine. Don't be a martyr." She opened her blanket. An invitation and a challenge. He hesitated, then slid in beside her, their bodies sharing warmth while the storm raged outside. They didn't speak, didn't need to. The intimacy was more profound than any she'd experienced in her penthouse with men who'd whispered empty promises. This was survival, trust, something elemental and honest. The next morning, Lily presented them with a drawing. It showed 3 figures, holding hands in front of a house. Snow falling around them. "That's us," she announced. "Our family." Arthur started to correct her, to explain that Evelyn was just someone they were helping, but the words died in his throat. Evelyn was staring at the drawing with an expression he'd never seen before, wonder mixed with grief for the childhood she'd never had. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Evelyn said, her voice thick. "Can I keep it?" Lily beamed. "I'll make you another one. With a dog. We should have a dog." The moment shattered when Arthur's encrypted phone buzzed. Elias had sent a message. They found the cabin. Satellite surveillance. You have maybe 6 hours before the roads are clear enough. Get out now. On the third day, trapped in the cabin, while Lily napped, Evelyn discovered a hidden partition in the USB's file structure. Her laptop, running on battery power they couldn't spare, revealed documents that made her blood run cold. Not only was Damien poisoning her father, but he'd orchestrated her mother's car accident 22 years ago. The brake line failure that had sent Margaret Sterling's Mercedes off a cliff hadn't been mechanical failure, but murder, designed to break William's spirit and make him pliable. Evelyn stared at the screen, her world reshaping itself around this revelation. Her mother's death had defined everything: her father's coldness, her own emotional armor, the way she'd learned to survive without love. And it had all been orchestrated by a man who'd attended the funeral, who'd comforted her father, who'd slowly wormed his way into their lives like a parasite. "I'm going to kill him," she said quietly, her voice devoid of emotion. Arthur took the laptop from her hands. "Number. You're going to destroy him with the truth. Death would be mercy. Prison. Public humiliation. Losing everything that's justice. My father needs to know. Your father might be involved. Number." But even as she denied it, doubt crept in. Had William known? Had he traded his wife's life for power? The thought made her physically ill. She grabbed Arthur's phone before he could stop her, typing a message to her father's private number. "Dad, I'm safe. Damien is trying to kill me. Please help. I have evidence of Mom's murder." Arthur lunged for the phone, but it was too late. The message was sent. "You just signed our death warrants," he said quietly. "He's my father, and Damien owns everyone around him." As if to prove his point, Arthur's surveillance app triggered. Vehicles approaching from 3 directions. Still miles away, but closing fast. The storm had broken enough for them to navigate the mountain roads. They had minutes, not hours. William Sterling received his daughter's message in his library, bourbon trembling in his hand. Beside him, his assistant of 15 years, a man Damien had placed there, read it over his shoulder. Within seconds, Damien knew exactly where they were. The attack came at dawn. Arthur had moved them to a defensive position in the cabin's root cellar, but he knew they couldn't hold for long. 6 mercenaries, military-grade weapons, tactical coordination. He had a hunting rifle, a pistol, and 2 civilians to protect. The first wave came from the front, flashbangs, and smoke grenades preceding armored figures. Arthur had anticipated this. Had rigged the entrance with improvised explosives, made from cleaning supplies and camping fuel. The explosion bought them seconds, not minutes. "Don't talk," he commanded Evelyn and Lily, knowing the mercenaries would be using acoustic equipment to locate them. Lily pressed against Evelyn, who wrapped her arms around the child with fierce protectiveness. In that moment, she wasn't a CEO or an heiress. She was just a woman protecting a little girl who'd drawn her into a family portrait. The second wave came through the windows. Arthur engaged them with controlled bursts, his military training keeping him calm while his world exploded around him. A mercenary broke through. Arthur was out of ammunition. They grappled, crashed into the wall, the man's superior armor and youth overwhelming Arthur's experience. The mercenary raised his weapon for the killing shot. Evelyn hit him with the cast iron pan from the stove, a savage blow that dropped him instantly. She stood over the unconscious man, breathing hard. Blood splattered on her white sweater. Arthur had never seen anything more beautiful than Evelyn Sterling choosing violence to protect them. "We can't win here," Arthur gasped. "But I know where we can." The warehouse sat on the industrial edge of the city, a building Arthur had rigged with cameras during his time preparing safe houses. Every corner, every angle, all feeding to a server that backed up to the cloud. If they were going to die, it would be documented. Evidence that even Damien couldn't erase. They arrived just ahead of their pursuers, Lily hidden with Elias at a secure location. It was just Arthur and Evelyn now, making their final stand. She'd refused to leave him, refused to run while he fought alone. They'd argued, briefly and intensely, before she'd simply picked up a weapon and said, "Together, or not at all." The warehouse echoed with their footsteps as they took positions. Arthur had chosen this battlefield carefully, multiple levels, scattered cover, emergency exits he'd mapped, but the mercenaries wouldn't know. Most importantly, the cameras that would capture everything. Damien arrived with the second wave. Unable to resist being present for the final act, he entered the warehouse in his silver-gray suit, diamond watch glinting in the industrial lighting, looking incongruous among the rust and debris. His pale face showed satisfaction, as his men surrounded Arthur and Evelyn's position. "The USB," he called out, his voice echoing. "Give it to me, and I'll make it quick. The girl doesn't have to suffer." Arthur emerged from cover, hands visible but not raised. "You mean the USB that details how you murdered Margaret Sterling? How you've been poisoning William? How you've stolen $40 million through shell companies?" Damien's composure cracked slightly. "No one will believe a maintenance man and a disgraced CEO. They'll believe video evidence," Evelyn said, stepping out beside Arthur. "Every word you're saying is being recorded, transmitted, backed up where your hackers can't reach." Damien laughed. "A sound like breaking glass. You think I care about recordings? I own judges, prosecutors, entire media networks. The truth is, whatever I say it, Island, not anymore." Arthur held up his phone, showing a live stream. 12,000 viewers and climbing. Amazing what goes viral these days. That's when Damien lost control. He pulled a gun, chrome-plated, decorative, the weapon of a man who paid others to kill. "Then you'll die knowing you accomplished nothing." The gunfight erupted in chaos. Mercenaries firing, Arthur and Evelyn diving for cover, concrete chips flying like shrapnel. Arthur had given Evelyn a crash course in tactical movement, but she was still a civilian, still vulnerable. He tried to shield her, to draw fire, but there were too many angles, too many shooters. A mercenary flanked them. Arthur's weapon clicked empty. The man smiled, raising his rifle. Evelyn grabbed a fire extinguisher, spraying foam in his face before swinging it like a club. The man went down, and she took his weapon, her hands steady despite never having held an assault rifle before. They fought back to back, Arthur calling out positions while Evelyn provided covering fire. She was magnificent, terrified, but determined. A warrior in a blood-stained sweater. They moved through the warehouse like dancers, each covering the other's weakness, wordless communication born of absolute trust. Damien watched his mercenaries fall one by one, his pale face growing paler. The live stream viewer count had passed 50,000. Comments flooded in, people recognizing him, calling for justice. His phone rang board members, lawyers, contacts in law enforcement, all abandoning ship. "You've destroyed everything," he snarled, advancing on their position. 20 years of work. You destroyed yourself." Evelyn replied, standing tall despite a graze on her shoulder. "The moment you killed my mother, you signed your own warrant." Damien raised his gun toward her. Arthur moved to intercept, but he was too far away. The shot rang out, but Damien fell, clutching his shoulder. Elias Flynn stood in the doorway, FBI tactical team spreading out behind him. "Arthur Miller, you magnificent bastard," Elias called out. "You always did know how to throw a party." The arrest was textbook. Damien Cross, screaming about his connections, his power, his influence, was dragged away in handcuffs while news helicopters circled overhead. The live stream had gone beyond viral, it was international news. The fall of Sterling Industries, the murder conspiracy, the heroic maintenance man and the CEO who'd risked everything for justice. William Sterling was arrested at his estate, his cognitive decline too advanced to fully understand the charges. The poisoning had done irreversible damage. He would spend his remaining years in a medical facility, his empire dismantled, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about power and corruption. Evelyn lost everything. The board voted her out within hours. Her assets were frozen pending investigation. The penthouse, the cars, the designer wardrobe all gone. She stood outside Sterling Tower with a single suitcase, watching workers remove her name from the building directory. Arthur found her there at sunset. "You okay?" She laughed, a sound with edges. "I'm nobody now. No power, no money, no name that means anything except scandal. You're wrong." He took her hand. "You're the woman who fought beside me, who protected Lily, who chose truth over comfort. That means everything." They walked away together, her heels clicking one last time on the pavement she'd once owned. 6 months passed. Spring arrived in Vermont, with wildflowers and mud season. Arthur had returned to maintenance work, this time at the local elementary school where Lily attended. The pay was less, but he could have lunch with his daughter, help with science projects, be present in ways Sterling Tower had never allowed. He'd bought a small house with his veterans' benefits, nothing fancy but solid, with a yard big enough for the garden Lily wanted to plant. They spent weekends building raised beds, planning where the tomatoes would go, debating whether flowers or vegetables were more important. Life had found a rhythm again, quieter but somehow fuller. Evelyn had vanished after the trials. She'd testified against Damien, her composure never cracking even when his lawyers tried to destroy her character. Damien got life without parole for murder, conspiracy, and racketeering. The other board members received lesser sentences. Sterling Industries was broken up and sold, its pieces scattered to competitors. Arthur heard rumors Evelyn had moved to Boston, was working at a nonprofit, had cut her distinctive platinum hair. He didn't search for her, didn't push. She needed time to discover who she was, without the armor of wealth and power. But Lily asked about her constantly, had kept every drawing she'd made of their family, including new ones where Evelyn featured prominently. The knock came on a Saturday afternoon in April. Arthur opened the door to find Evelyn standing on his porch, wearing jeans and a simple white blouse, her hair now its natural honey brown, shorter, softer. She looked younger, less sharp-edged, more real. "Hi," she said simply. Before Arthur could respond, Lily barreled past him, throwing her arms around Evelyn's waist. "You came back. I knew you'd come back. Dad said you needed time, but I knew you'd come back." Evelyn knelt, hugging Lily properly, her eyes wet. "I missed you, sweetheart." "Every single day." "We're having a picnic," Lily announced. "Dad made sandwiches, and I made cookies. But they're kind of burnt. But you have to try them anyway." They walked to the park, the three of them, Lily chattering about school, her garden, the neighbor's cat that kept visiting. Normal things, small things, the texture of a life without danger or secrets. Evelyn had brought a kite, a butterfly pattern that made Lily squeal with delight. While Lily ran ahead, trying to catch the wind, Arthur and Evelyn sat on the blanket. They didn't speak at first, just watched Lily's joy. The kite, dancing against the blue sky. "I work at a shelter now," Evelyn said finally. "Helping women escape dangerous situations. Using everything I learned about systems and power, but for something good. That's perfect for you. I'm different now. Poorer but lighter somehow. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." Lily called for help. The kite string had tangled. Evelyn rose, graceful even in flat shoes, and helped untangle the mess with patience Arthur wouldn't have expected from the woman in red he'd saved in a parking garage. They worked together. Evelyn's hands, gentle on Lily's, teaching her about wind patterns and lift. The science of flight explained in terms a 7-year-old could grasp. The kite soared higher, bright against the spring sky. Lily shrieked with joy, running across the grass, her laughter carrying on the wind. Evelyn returned to the blanket, sitting closer to Arthur this time, their shoulders touching. "She's extraordinary," Evelyn said softly. "You've raised someone extraordinary. She likes you. I love her." The admission came easily, naturally. "I love both of you." Arthur turned to study her face, seeing the woman she'd become, not the CEO, not the heiress, but Evelyn. Just Evelyn. He didn't speak, didn't need to. He took her hand, interlacing their fingers, feeling the calluses she'd earned from honest work. They sat that way, hands joined, watching Lily master the kite. No grand declarations, no dramatic proposals, just two people who'd survived the worst together, finding something better in the quiet aftermath. The kite climbed higher, a splash of color and hope against the endless sky, while below, a small girl laughed with pure happiness. Evelyn leaned her head against Arthur's shoulder. He pressed a kiss to her hair. Lily waved at them from across the field, and they waved back, their joined hands rising together. A family not bound by law or blood, but by choice, by shared danger transformed into shared peace. The kite soared on, catching currents they couldn't see but trusted anyway, carrying their quiet joy higher and higher into the promise of spring. Sometimes, the greatest love stories aren't about grand gestures or perfect timing. They're about two people choosing each other when everything else falls apart, finding beauty in the wreckage, building something new from the ashes of what was. Arthur and Evelyn had discovered this truth in the most unlikely way through danger, sacrifice, and the simple courage of a child's drawing that imagined them as family before they could imagine it themselves. Truth has a way of destroying and creating simultaneously. It demolished Sterling Industries, sent powerful men to prison, rewrote the story of one of America's great corporate dynasties. But it also freed Evelyn from a golden cage she hadn't known imprisoned her, gave Arthur the partner he'd never thought to seek, and offered Lily the complete family she'd dreamed into existence with crayons and hope. Justice came not through violence, but through transparency, the simple act of exposing secrets to light. And love, real love, grew not in boardrooms or penthouses but in a cabin during a snowstorm, a warehouse under fire, and finally on a spring afternoon when a butterfly kite danced against the sky. If you believe justice and love must prevail even in silence, share this story. Sometimes, the bravest words are the ones never spoken.